What happens when royal privilege meets brutal honesty on live television? In just 37 seconds, one comment would trigger the most explosive celebrity meltdown ever caught on camera, turning a routine interview into television carnage that shocked millions of viewers worldwide. The studio lights blazed hot that Tuesday morning as Piers Morgan settled into his familiar chair, coffee steaming beside a stack of prepared questions. Across from him sat Meghan Markle, draped in designer elegance but carrying an air of visible tension. The morning show had become known for its no-nonsense interviews, and today would be no different. "Good morning, Meghan. Thanks for joining us." Piers began with his trademark directness. "I want to start with something that's been on everyone's minds. Your recent comments about the royal family have caused quite a stir. Care to explain?" Meghan shifted uncomfortably, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping the arm of her chair. "Piers, I think people are misunderstanding my position. When you're thrust into that world, you realize how suffocating it can be. The constant scrutiny, the outdated protocols, it's not what people think at Island." "But surely you knew what you were signing up for," Piers pressed, leaning forward slightly. "This isn't exactly a surprise. The royal family has been under public scrutiny for centuries. You married into that, knowing full well what it entailed." "That's easy for you to say," Meghan snapped back, her composed facade beginning to crack. "You've never had to deal with the kind of pressure I faced. The racism, the isolation. You have no idea what it's like." Piers raised an eyebrow. "Meghan, with respect, you're talking to someone who's been in the public eye for decades. I've faced my share of criticism and controversy. The difference is, I don't blame everyone else when things get tough." The tension in the studio was palpable. Camera operators zoomed in closer, sensing the brewing storm. Meghan's jaw tightened as she processed his words. "Are you seriously comparing your situation to mine?" she asked, her voice rising an octave. "You're a white British man with privilege written all over you. You could never understand what I went through." "Here we go," Piers muttered, shaking his head. "The race card comes out the moment someone challenges you. This is exactly what people are tired of, Meghan. Instead of taking responsibility for your choices, you hide behind accusations of racism." Meghan's eyes flashed with anger. "Hide behind? Are you kidding me right now? I faced genuine discrimination within that family, and you're sitting there dismissing it like it's some kind of excuse?" "I'm not dismissing anything," Piers replied calmly, his voice steady despite the rising heat. "But I am questioning why every single criticism you face somehow gets twisted into an attack on your race. It's a convenient way to shut down any legitimate discussion about your behavior." The studio audience was completely silent, watching this verbal sparring match unfold. Meghan's publicist, sitting in the front row, looked increasingly nervous, occasionally glancing toward the exit. "My behavior?" Meghan repeated incredulously. "What exactly about my behavior bothers you so much, Piers?" "Well, let's start with the constant victim narrative," Piers said, consulting his notes. "You married into arguably the most privileged family on earth, lived in palaces, had access to incredible resources, and yet somehow you're the one who suffered the most. It's hard for ordinary people to relate to that level of entitlement." Meghan's face flushed red. "Entitlement? You think wanting basic human decency is entitlement? You think expecting not to be treated like a second-class citizen in your own family is asking too much?" "What I think," Piers continued, his tone remaining measured, "is that you had unrealistic expectations about what royal life would be like. You wanted all the perks but none of the responsibilities. When it didn't work out like a fairy tale, you decided to burn bridges on your way out." "That is absolutely not what happened," Meghan protested, her voice growing shrill. "You're twisting everything to fit your narrative. You've had it out for me from the beginning." Piers chuckled softly, which only seemed to infuriate her more. "Meghan, I actually defended you in the early days. I thought you could bring something fresh to the royal family. But your actions since then, the way you've handled criticism, the way you've thrown your own family under the bus, it's been disappointing." "Thrown my family under the bus?" Meghan's voice cracked with emotion. "My family abandoned me long before I said anything publicly. And as for the royal family, I only spoke my truth about what I experienced." "Your truth," Piers repeated, emphasizing the words. "That's an interesting phrase. Not the truth, but your truth. Do you see how that sounds? Like you're creating your own version of events that may not align with reality?" The interview was spiraling into dangerous territory. Meghan's media training seemed to be failing her as emotions took over. Her carefully crafted public image was crumbling in real time. "So now you're calling me a liar?" she demanded, her voice trembling with rage. "I'm suggesting that your version of events might be colored by your feelings rather than facts," Piers replied diplomatically. We've seen this pattern before. Anyone who questions you or doesn't give you exactly what you want suddenly becomes the villain in your story. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. The sudden movement caught everyone off guard. I don't have to sit here and listen to this character assassination. Sit down, Meghan, Piers said firmly, but not unkindly. We're having a conversation here. If you can't handle basic questions about your public statements, maybe you shouldn't be making them. Basic questions? She scoffed, remaining standing. You're attacking my integrity, my character, my family. This isn't journalism, it's a hit job. I'm asking you to defend positions you've taken publicly? Piers countered, his patience beginning to show signs of strain. If you can't do that without falling apart, then maybe those positions weren't very solid to begin with. The camera captured every micro-expression, every telltale sign of Meghan's growing distress. Her breathing was becoming shallow, her hands visibly shaking. You know what, Piers? You're right about one thing. I don't have to defend myself to you or anyone else. I know what I experienced and I know what's true. But you came on this show to talk about these very issues, Piers pointed out logically. You can't expect to make serious accusations and then get upset when someone asks for evidence or challenges your claims. I'm not upset, Meghan insisted, though her entire demeanor suggested otherwise. I'm disappointed. I thought I was coming here for a fair interview, not an ambush. Piers laughed genuinely at that. An ambush? Meghan? These are questions any competent journalist would ask. The fact that you consider basic accountability an ambush says everything about how you've been handled with kid gloves up until now. The comment hit its mark. Meghan's face went through several expressions in quick succession: shock, hurt, and finally, pure fury. Kid gloves? She repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. Kid gloves? She repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. You think the media has treated me with kid gloves? Are you completely delusional? Piers leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed by her escalating anger. I think certain outlets have been afraid to ask you tough questions because they're worried about being labeled racist or sexist. So yes, in many ways, you've been protected from the kind of scrutiny that other public figures face routinely. Protected? Meghan's voice cracked with disbelief. I've been torn apart in the press since day one. They've criticized everything from my clothes to my family to my breathing pattern. How is that protection? Because the criticism has been superficial, Piers explained patiently. Fashion choices, family drama, tabloid nonsense. What I'm talking about is substantive questioning about your claims, your decisions, your inconsistencies. That's been largely absent. Meghan began pacing behind her chair, her composure completely abandoned now. Inconsistencies? What inconsistencies? Well, let's start with your privacy complaints, Piers said, pulling out a tablet. You've said repeatedly that you just want privacy for your family, yet you've done multiple high-profile interviews, documentaries, podcasts. You've written tell-all books. That doesn't exactly scream privacy-seeking behavior. Those were necessary to tell our side of the story. Meghan shot back, her voice rising. We were being attacked and lied about. We had to defend ourselves. By going on the most watched television programs in the world? Piers questioned. By signing massive deals with streaming services? Come on, Meghan. You can't have it both ways. You can't court publicity when it benefits you and then complain about invasion of privacy when it doesn't. Meghan stopped pacing and stared at him with undisguised hatred. You really don't get it, do you? You think this is all some calculated game to me? Honestly, yes I do, Piers replied bluntly. I think you're incredibly media savvy, and you know exactly how to play the victim card to maximum effect. The problem is, people are starting to see through it. People like you mean, she spat. Middle-aged white men who can't stand to see a strong woman of color speaking her truth. Piers sighed heavily. And there it is again. Anyone who disagrees with you is automatically a racist misogynist. It's textbook deflection, Meghan. You can't engage with the actual substance of criticism, so you attack the critic's identity instead. Maybe because the criticism is rooted in prejudice, Meghan countered, her hands gesticulating wildly. Maybe because you would never speak to a white duchess this way. I've interviewed plenty of white duchesses and treated them exactly the same way, Piers replied calmly. I've grilled politicians, celebrities, royals of every background. My approach doesn't change based on someone's race or gender. It changes based on whether they're being honest or not. So now I'm dishonest too? Meghan's voice was becoming hysterical. First I'm entitled, then I'm playing games. Now I'm a liar. Is there anything about me you actually believe? Piers considered the question seriously. I believe you're intelligent. I believe you're ambitious. I believe you genuinely thought royal life would be different than it was. What I don't believe is that you're the innocent victim you're portraying yourself as." The studio was dead silent, except for the low hum of cameras and equipment. Even the crew seemed to be holding their breath, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. "You know what your problem is, Piers?" Meghan said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You're threatened by me. You're threatened by what I represent, a woman who won't be silenced, who won't play by your antiquated rules." Piers actually smiled at that. "Threatened? Meghan, you're giving yourself way too much credit. I interview world leaders, war correspondents, people who actually change the world. You're a former cable television actress who married well. The idea that I'm threatened by you is genuinely amusing." The insult hit home. Meghan's face went white with rage. "How dare you dismiss my career like that? I worked my way up in this industry. I earned everything I achieved before I ever met Harry, on a basic cable show that most people had never heard of." Piers continued mercilessly. "Let's not pretend you were some A-list superstar before you became a royal. Your fame comes entirely from your marriage, and we both know it." "That is so typical," Meghan seethed. "Reduce a woman's accomplishments to nothing more than who she married. You're proving my point about the kind of sexist attitudes I've had to deal with." "I'm stating facts," Piers replied evenly. "Before you married Harry, could you have gotten this interview? Could you have commanded the attention you get now? Of course not. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's be honest about where your platform comes from." Meghan was visibly shaking now, her carefully applied makeup beginning to show signs of stress. "You are such a miserable, bitter man. No wonder your own television career has been such a disaster." Piers raised an eyebrow. "Personal attacks now? That's usually what people resort to when they've run out of actual arguments. For someone who claims to be above all this, you certainly know how to get down in the mud when it suits you." "I'm defending myself against your attacks," Meghan protested weakly. "No, you're lashing out because you can't handle being challenged," Piers corrected. "This is exactly what I mean about entitlement. You expect everyone to just accept your version of events without question. When someone doesn't, you fall apart." Meghan grabbed her purse from beside her chair, her movements jerky and agitated. "I don't have to listen to this abuse." "Abuse?" Piers looked genuinely confused. "Meghan, I've asked you legitimate questions about your public statements. If that constitutes abuse in your mind, then you really aren't cut out for public life." "Legitimate questions?" She laughed bitterly. "You've done nothing but attack my character, dismiss my experiences, and insult my career. That's not journalism. That's harassment. That's accountability," Piers shot back. "Something you're clearly not used to. When you make serious accusations against one of the most beloved institutions in the country, you should expect serious questions in return." Meghan slung her purse over her shoulder, her decision clearly made. "The most beloved institution? Are you serious right now? That institution is built on colonialism, racism, and oppression. The fact that you can't see that shows exactly who you are." The political turn in her argument seemed to energize Piers rather than intimidate him. "So now the entire monarchy is racist and oppressive? Based on what evidence? Your feelings? Your interpretation of conversations that no one else heard?" "Based on my lived experience," Meghan said, her voice getting higher and more strained. "Something you'll never understand because you've never been on the receiving end of that kind of treatment." "Your lived experience?" Piers repeated mockingly. "The lived experience of living in palaces, wearing million-pound jewelry, having your wedding watched by billions of people? Such terrible oppression. That was the final straw. That was the final straw." Meghan's face contorted with pure rage as she whipped around to face him directly. "You arrogant, privileged piece of garbage. You sit there in your little bubble, judging everyone else, thinking you know everything about everything." The studio erupted into chaos. Camera operators scrambled to keep both subjects in frame as Meghan began moving erratically around the set. Her publicist stood up in alarm, clearly debating whether to intervene. Piers remained seated, his expression shifting from mild amusement to genuine concern about her mental state. "Meghan, you need to calm down. This is being broadcast live to millions of people." "I don't care," she shrieked, her voice breaking. "Let them see what kind of person you really are. Let them see how you treat people who don't kiss your feet." "I treat people the way they deserve to be treated," Piers replied, his voice still remarkably steady. "If you can't handle basic questions without having a complete meltdown, maybe you should reconsider putting yourself in these situations." Meghan spun around, nearly losing her balance in her designer heels. "Basic questions? You called me a liar. You said my career was worthless. You dismissed everything I've been through. I questioned your version of events. pointed out inconsistencies in your public statements, and put your achievements in proper context, Piers clarified. If that equals calling you a liar in your mind, then maybe you need to examine why you're so defensive. Defensive? Meghan laughed maniacally. I'm not defensive. I'm disgusted. Disgusted that this passes for journalism in this country. Disgusted that people like you get platforms to spread your hate. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the studio that she was currently using her own massive platform to launch personal attacks while accusing him of spreading hate. Piers seized on the contradiction immediately. Hate? Meghan, listen to yourself right now. Listen to the language you're using, the personal attacks you're making. Who exactly is spreading hate in this conversation? She paused for a moment, seeming to realize how she sounded, but the brief moment of self-awareness only made her angrier. You drove me to this. This is what you wanted, isn't it? To make me look unstable on live television. What I wanted was an honest conversation about your public claims, Piers said, his patience clearly wearing thin. What I got was exactly what I expected. Someone who can dish it out but can't take it when the tables are turned. Meghan's breathing was becoming increasingly labored. Sweat was beginning to show through her makeup despite the studio's air conditioning. You are a disgusting excuse for a human being. Everyone knows what you are. Everyone sees through your act. My act? Piers finally stood up, his own composure beginning to crack slightly. Meghan, you've been performing since the moment you sat down. The victim routine, the righteous indignation, the race baiting when you run out of actual arguments. If anyone's putting on an act here, it's you. The comment seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her face cycling through disbelief, hurt, and finally pure hatred. Race baiting? Did you just accuse me of race baiting? I accused you of using race as a weapon to shut down legitimate criticism, Piers clarified. Which is exactly what you've been doing this entire interview. The moment someone challenges you, out comes the racism card. Meghan looked around the studio wildly, as if seeking allies among the crew members, who were all studiously avoiding eye contact. Is everyone just going to sit there and let him talk to me like this? Is no one going to say anything? The awkward silence that followed seemed to infuriate her even more. Her publicist finally stood up and started making her way toward the set, clearly recognizing that intervention was necessary. This is unbelievable, Meghan muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. This is absolutely unbelievable. I came here in good faith, and this is what I get. You came here to promote your brand and control the narrative? Piers corrected. The problem is, I don't let people do that on my show. I ask real questions and expect real answers, something you're apparently incapable of providing. Meghan's publicist had reached the edge of the set and was frantically making hand signals, trying to get her client's attention. But Meghan was beyond reason now, completely consumed by her rage. Real questions? She spat. You want real questions? Here's a real question for you, Piers. How do you sleep at night knowing that your entire career is built on tearing other people down? How do you look at yourself in the mirror? Piers actually chuckled at that. I sleep very well, actually. I've built my career on holding powerful people accountable, something this country desperately needs more of, not less. Powerful people? Meghan's voice cracked again. I'm not powerful. I'm a woman trying to protect her family from people like you. You're a multimillionaire with global influence who just signed deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars, Piers pointed out. If that's not powerful, I don't know what island. But you want to be seen as powerless because it serves your victim narrative. The truth of his words seemed to hit her like a slap. For a moment, she looked genuinely stunned, as if seeing herself clearly for the first time. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by an even deeper fury. You know what? I'm done. I'm done with this interview, I'm done with you, and I'm done with this whole toxic culture that you represent. She started walking toward the edge of the set, her heels clicking loudly on the polished floor. Piers called after her, his journalistic instincts taking over. Meghan, you can't just walk away every time someone asks you tough questions. This is exactly the behavior that people are criticizing. She stopped and turned around one final time, her face twisted with contempt. Watch me. And with that, she stormed off the set, leaving behind a stunned studio audience and millions of shocked viewers. Piers sat back down slowly, shaking his head as he watched her disappear behind the cameras. Well, he said to the live audience, I think that tells you everything you need to know about Meghan Markle's ability to handle accountability. When confronted with basic questions about her public statements, she resorted to personal attacks, accusations of racism, and finally just ran away. He straightened his tie and looked directly into the camera. This is what happens when someone becomes so insulated from criticism that they lose the ability to defend their positions rationally. It's a masterclass in entitlement and the dangers of unchecked celebrity culture. The studio remained silent as the cameras continued rolling, capturing one of the most dramatic television moments in recent memory. In just 37 minutes, what started as a routine celebrity interview had devolved into a complete meltdown that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. As the show cut to commercial break, Piers remained in his chair, reviewing his notes with the calm satisfaction of a journalist who had done exactly what he set out to do, asked the hard questions that others wouldn't.